Good morning. So I get this phone call. How'd you like to come speak to a Creative Mornings gathering? Great, I say. How's August 25th? That works. I say, cool, you're in. Pause. The topic? Okay. No pressure. So aside from a Mensa membership card or the results of one of those highly dubious online intelligence tests, one of which I took immediately after realizing what I said yes to, there are very few widely accepted imprimaturs of genius. And if one is going to unpack the notion, it would help to talk to a few bona fide genii, right? But where to find them? They're those bars in the back of the Apple stores. But I have found them inconsistent in the delivery of that promise. There are the retroactive citations conferred on long dead intellectual and cultural lions of civilization, but they're dead, so I can't ask them how they got their status. But there are MacArthur Genius Grants. Those are those major chunks of change that are afforded annually to individuals who, and I'm quoting from the Foundation's website, individuals who have shown extraordinary originality and dedication in their creative pursuits and a marked capacity for self-direction. Bonus point, I know a couple. They're both playwrights. So I think about calling them up and saying, so what makes you a genius? But that felt a little putting on the spotting. Then I thought about the fact that the two of them, as well as a handful of other people that I've gotten to work with that I would stone cold call genii, they all share some common denominator, personality traits, and behaviors. And so I figure, here's a way in. So, a component of genius. Understand this is just the beginning. I was at a theater conference recently in Portland, and I was attending a session on the underrepresentation of women and people of color in leadership positions in cultural institutions, particularly those of significant economic scale. The facilitator had pointed out that unlike male candidates for leadership position, women are seldom hired on the basis of their potential, but instead have to have demonstrated capacity for the work on offer. In other words, you had to have done the job to get the job, which is tricky. So in an exercise designed to subvert this practice, folks were encouraged to call out capacities that they possessed that could be perceived as transferable leadership skills and perhaps convince a search committee that they were viable candidates. So some really good capacities were called out. I can multitask while remaining nurturing. I can make a tiny budget go a long, long way. And then this woman across the room from me called out, I can identify and call out patriarchy. Bam. I mean, that was exactly her delivery. It was like this mic drop punctuation at the end. I can identify and call out patriarchy. Okay. She clearly perceived this as a transferable leadership skill. I was really glad at that moment that she couldn't read my thought bubble. So don't get me wrong. I do believe that that woman possessed the capacity to recognize and accurately assess landscape, and that she believed that that was a leadership skill. But recognition and identification is just prerequisite. It's critical, it's foundational, but it's not enough. Prerequisite only. And a quick sidebar. I cannot say or write the word prerequisite without thinking about Wendy Hoops. Wendy Hoops and I were in a completely ridiculous and wonderful grad school course together called Performing the Unconscious. This is a course where every week we gathered in front of a group of strangers and we performed or narrated our dreams, and we got credit for this. And while I remember absolutely none of my own dreams from that course, I remember Wendy Hoops. And this was my favorite. Okay, in her dream, Wendy wakes up suddenly one morning and she realizes that it is absolutely the last day to register for courses for the next semester. She also realizes she is exactly 1 credit away from graduation. So she sprints across campus to the registrar's office, where there was a long hallway. There was always a long hallway in dreams. I don't know if you've noticed this. So on the long hallway, there are computer printouts, and they list the registration information for every single course on offer next semester at Northwestern, except every course that has been filled and is therefore no longer available for registration has been blacked out with a giant Sharpie. And as Wendy looks down the long, long hallway, she realizes it is completely black, meaning that every freaking course on the Northwestern campus has been filled. But then, off the end of the hallway, she sees a thin white line. And she knows in that thin white line is the registration information for the only course left that she can take and pass, and therefore graduate. So she sprints to the thin white line, and she reads, okay. But back to the identifier of patriarchy. And the possibility that she may possess some element of genius if only. This is what we call a pregnant pause in the theater. We call it a beat. And I don't know any word that better captures the fullness of waiting for the other shoe to drop, which is typically the phenomenon after the words, if only. Genius may reside in the identifier. It may reside in all of you, it may reside in me, but we have to get to it. And that act of excavation is hard. It takes a long time, requires sacrifices, and it always demands sweat equity. So if life's been really good to you, you have maybe had a chance to go to the Gallery dell'Accademia in Florence. Not so much for the coursework, but for a certain 17-foot-tall marble statue of a naked guy whose sculptor is pretty universally deemed a genius. This is the home of Michelangelo's David. Here's the thing. Oh, and he's at the end of a long hallway. If for a moment you step out of the eyes on the prize typical tourist trajectory of staring straight ahead at, I mean, let's face it, the biggest, whitest, most marbled package you are ever going to lay eyes on. There is something else to be seen. If you look left and you look right, you will see genius in action. Michelangelo's Prisoners are an unfinished series of figures that seem to be actively struggling to release themselves from the stone. And they line the hallway on the way to David. Michelangelo believed that the sculptor was a tool of God who didn't create, but merely revealed the brilliant and powerful figures that he had placed in the stone. So the sculptor's job, according to Michelangelo, was just to chip away the excess. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of us, even armed with seriously kick-ass chisels, would not find in the stone what Michelangelo found in the stone. And if you get really close to the figures, and the guards love it when you do this, you can see these violent grooves from his chisel. He was seriously hacking away at that stone because Michelangelo knew there was something beautiful in there even before he or anybody else could see it. Next component of genius. This capacity itself is a kind of chiseling, if you think about it. in order to see what might exist, you first have to carve away, actively reject the knowns, known patterns, known circumstances, known knowns. If now is the moment to see what is not yet visible, you have to clear your vision of excess clutter. This is not revelatory. This is actually just what we call imagining, right? That thing that you did as a kid that provided you with really awesome friends that your parents tolerated and your sucky siblings couldn't see. Imagining is also the thing that you probably started doing less and less of as you got older, because it was labeled as unproductive and maybe even counter-indicated for successful outcomes, as in stop daydreaming and apply yourself. Hooey. Absolute hooey. Because even if you're not trying to cultivate your capacity for genius, the intentional application of genius is an apt description of any number of creative professions, including one that I'm particularly fond of, because I've made my living doing it for a bunch of years and enjoyed doing so. There are, believe it or not, actual skills involved in being a stage director. What, right? People from my theater are saying, one of the essential skills of a director is the capacity to imagine metaphoric environments in which impossible things can happen. My all-time favorite stage direction provides an illustration of this. A stage direction, by the way, is a chunk of text that a playwright puts in his or her play to assist the director in the making of a world. This one is from Y. York's 1992 play, Rain, Some Fish, No Elephants. Okay. So I'm pretty sure the only way to solve this particular challenge is with imagination. Because a literal depiction, aside from being illegal and immoral, would be a nightmare to clean up after. It's a great play. And while it may seem that imagining a theatrical gesture that honors a playwright's impulse is not applicable to your day-to-day lives, the capacity to imagine the unimaginable is. Mikhail Bakhtin was a 20th century Russian writer and philosopher who coined the term carnivalization. And I'm going to grossly oversimplify here. And it's not because I have any doubts about your capacity to understand, but because I encountered Bakhtin while I was in grad school performing my dreams, and this is really all I remember. Carnivalization is a societal force, an energy that exists only when the old ways are crumbling and the new replacing forms and structures haven't yet emerged with enough heft to step on the neck of our collective imagination. In other words, the carnival time is a generative time when the old ways are crumbling and the new rules haven't yet been written. It is, by definition, a finite space, a wormhole that will close up, to get all Neil deGrasse Tyson about it. But while it exists, the carnival is a space and time where amazing things can happen. Now, this doesn't exactly line up with Bakhtin's use of the term, but I like to think of it as a space that we can create for ourselves, right? Rather than waiting for the hegemony to crumble and the welcome to the carnival sign to start lighting up, might one not decide for one's own self to eschew existing forms and structures, the thou shalts and the thou shalt nots, and on the other side of that decision, before reality crashes down, as reality is wont to do, make some stuff. Really do some shit. I like to quote Ayn Rand after I swear, because it classes the place back up. I also like a good acronym. And this is my acronym for the pursuit of genius. 2 A's, 2 I's, 2 E's, and always C. The 2 A's we sort of touched on. That's assess and analyze. This is the looking left and right function to help you understand your landscape. Because in order for genius to kick into gear, we need to need it. And the way we know we need it is to assess our landscapes, interior, exterior, workplace, universe, and see a need, an opportunity for growth, right? There's a presupposition here that you'll find a flaw. And if anyone here has assessed their interior and exterior landscapes and has not found a flaw, then I will have what you are having, because clearly your world is perfect. But say you found a spot, a speed bump, a flaw we won't call a flaw, but instead we'll call an opportunity. Cool. Time for the other A, analyze. Because remember the identifier of patriarchy? Assessment without analysis is just noise. So what's analysis? Well, it's looking, it's digging, it is taking the bits and pieces of information that you find and using them to construct the why of your landscape and its bumps. And it is only then that you begin crafting a solution. A conclusion and a solution are not the same thing, by the way. Although I'm guessing most of us have been in that meeting or that conversation where somebody has confidently plunked down on the table their conclusion, the economic system simply isn't working, with the heft of, by naming it, I have just solved it. No, that wasn't a solution, yet again. This is where the 2 I's come in, imagination and intuition. In order for any solution to game change and to creep up on the possibility of genius, it has to involve imagination and intuition. And I know these are somewhat squishy terms for some in the MBA cohort. But without them, nothing genius can happen. Intuition is a particularly slippery one. Remember Malcolm Gladwell's Blink? Only his 2nd book, and he's already upending all of our thinking about process, privileging the adaptive unconscious over data-fed decisions, right? A wild reduction of his theory, trust your gut. I just saved you a Kindle fee and 8 hours of reading time. You're welcome. We know things in our viscera before we know them with words. And if once in a while we could just shut down the cerebrum and listen to the lizard brain, the intuition, without squashing it like a bug, we would learn things amazing, maybe genius things. I have an exercise for you. No, seriously, try it. You want extra credit? Right? This is hard. Imagination is not for the faint-hearted. This is maybe even uncomfortably hard. A word about comfort, and that fabled comfort zone that everybody is always telling you to step outside of. A moment of honesty. Does anybody actually inhabit a comfort zone? And if you do, is it big enough to walk around in? Do you keep your couch and your Snuggie there? I would like to retire the term comfort zone. I would like to instead talk about taking deep, fierce dives into discomfort. So you'll notice that nice Ms. Tharp does not suggest evading discomfort. She does not suggest solving it in some fashion. No, she says entertain it, welcome it in, have it make itself at home. Radical, at least for me. Because whether primal or intentional, my relationship with discomfort has always been of the run away variety. Here's the thing. We all know the answer, right? Discomfort is a necessary condition of genius. The agitation of it, the restlessness of it, the propulsion to do something because not doing simply isn't tenable. Those feelings are fuel. And anybody who abides by the maxim, fall down 7 times, get up 8, has developed the capacity to live with discomfort. They have also developed the capacity for the 2 E's and always the C. Remember our acronym, 2 A's, assess, analyze, 2 I's, imagination, intuition, 2 E's and a C. Endurance and energy, and always curiosity. I am gonna bullet train to the finish here, because if any of this is adding up for you, and I really hope that it is, you're maybe starting to itch a little. You wanna be writing, you wanna be sketching, you wanna be composing, you wanna be coding. You wanna be diving into discomfort. And you're gonna need endurance for that, because you're gonna be there for a minute or 2 while you make a new world. And you're gonna need energy, because as I've said a time or 4, this shit is hard. But that's okay. That's better than okay. Because the picture that you take from the top of a small mountain is way less cool than the picture you take from the top of Everest. Endure with energy, and about that final ingredient, always be curious. Because without curiosity, you will not be moved to assess and analyze your landscape in the first place. Without curiosity, your imagination and your intuition are going to leave some doors closed that really need to be opened. And without curiosity, you're not going to have the endurance and the energy to keep looking for that figure that you know is buried in the stone. Bless you. The first theater that I ever worked for was a little storefront theater called Wisdom Bridge in Chicago. You know Wisdom Bridge. We have to talk afterwards. Thank you. Okay, so Wisdom Bridge is a theater where a young actor named Aidan Quinn famously wrote the first line of Hamlet's soliloquy on the back wall of the theater with spray paint, to be or not to be tagged in fluorescent green. And if you know your Shakespeare, you know that the end of that line is, that is the question, which is perfect, because Wisdom Bridge Theater took its name from a completely genius aphorism. Or, as I like to think about it, so, go forth. Look left and right. Notice what's not there. Imagine what could be there and trust your gut on the answer. Persevere while you will that new thing into existence. And always, always be curious. Thank you.
All right, we're going to do a Q&A now. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Susan will call on you, and I will run a microphone to you. Please ask your question in the microphone so the video captures it.
All right. Oh, please. Oh, bless you. Yes. Right there.
Rule follower.
I try. So first off, thank you. That was fantastic. What do you, for yourself, do you feel was a moment of genius you've had? Mic drop.
So I have a kid. And when my kid was really little, my husband was traveling a lot, and sometimes we would spend weekends where for 48 hours it was me and my kid. And on Saturdays, we would walk up the street to the CVS. CVSs are wonderful when you're 3. And then we'd walk home. And at first, when we developed this ritual, I would feel myself sort of over-caffeinated, like, and there was a moment where I thought, what if I took off my watch? And what if I existed on somebody else's time? And in the time of the given moment, which is maybe all of that yapping and thinking about being present. But it felt really good. And I haven't learned it, I'm every day learning it, but I think there was something there in the notion of be in the time and space you're in, even if it's 3-year-old time. Why wouldn't you?
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Right back in that neck of the woods.
So your answer to that question, it ties in with what I was going to ask, which is, isn't there like a letter missing there? Another C, compassion? Because you can put all those things together and you can be the Unabomber. Well, I mean, which is genius of a kind, but there's connection, there's compassion, there's the ability to, and curiosity touches on this, but to connect to other humans.
Absolutely, and thank you, and I'll amend. No, you're absolutely right. Part of that always be curious thing. I remember in a course I took once, not in grad school, as a grown-up, a guy named John Lee was talking about how you diffuse anger. And he explained in really helpfully simple terms that when anger is building, the part of your brain that is holding that gets diffused when you're asked a question, right? Your circuitry has to go to answering the question, and it diffuses the anger. And I bring it up because I think part of, for me, what's implicit, but I need to make explicit, and thank you, in asking questions is an assumption, A, that you have much to learn, and B, that people have much to teach you. I think we're in an extraordinary American moment right now where our curiosity is at an all-time low. I was talking to some colleagues recently. Amanda Taub wrote this brilliant essay for the New York Times back in the fall about something she calls partisan refraction. And partisan refraction, her use of that word, or that term, meant the second we hear something in a conversation with somebody that we think identifies them politically, we immediately write a giant, overwhelming, stamping narrative on that person. Wait, I heard something, that means you're one of them, therefore, this is what you believe, this is what you do, this is how you behave. And we stop listening. She refers to it as New Age racism, partisan refraction. So, intentionally asking questions to learn is an act of compassion. And I'm going to change my slide. Thank you. Yes, right here.
Thank you. Curiosity is one of my favorite words, and actually for anyone who's ever worked for me, I ask them to be curious and proactive. So absolutely, couldn't agree more. My question for you is, when you found yourself in a place where you don't have these things, what do you do to rediscover that?
So, my job has some different responsibilities to it because while I'm a director, I'm also, I work at an organization, and I have to think about the organization. When I step into a rehearsal hall to make a play, there's an assumption that any of us have the answers. I don't have the answer. The playwright has some answers in the form of text, but not in walking, talking. The actors don't have the answers yet. The designers don't have the answer. And I find that two things really help. One is giving over to that humbly, saying, I don't know, early and often, but a deadline of when you have to figure things out, right? Because there are going to be people who paid money sitting in seats to see what you figured out, and they already have their tickets and they have dates on them, right? And actually, I think it was Leonard Bernstein, I think, who said that the two necessary components of genius is a great idea and not enough time to execute it. Right? So I think humility and velocity can get you back. Anyone else?
Let's do one more question.
Right there. Am I the only one who gets Chris Martin? Sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
Go ahead.
I grew up loving the children's story Alice in Wonderland. It's probably my favorite book because of her curiosity and bravery and her courageousness. And I learned a while ago that I didn't want to watch TV anymore because it can fuck you up. And to bring class back to that. So I do like Elizabeth Gilbert. She's a wonderful author for adults, and she's written Eat, Pray, Love, as well as Big Magic, and that's about, channeling your inner creativity and not getting upset when you have a creative idea, but you forget about it. It's like, it's okay, you can let it rest and then come back to it. So instead of watching television and getting all the images and things stuck into my brain or subconscious, I like to read affirmations or read things. And every time I feel like fear is coming up, I try to combat it with a mantra or, something positive, or I believe in Jesus Christ, so I try to picture Jesus, stuff like that. But what books do you recommend for adults? What's one of your favorite books that inspires curiosity and creativity and those affirmations we need maybe to find our genius?
John Stewart Gardner's Renewal was a recent gift. I geek out on self-help books. There's ridiculous stacks of them. I annoy the people I work with by saying, well, I read. Eckhart Tolle. I go back to again and again and again. And The Creative Principle by Gary Hirschberg. He was the creator of Nissan Design International. And he's the guy that came up with the notion of creative abrasion, right? That rather than seeking, it's sort of the comfort-discomfort thing, rather than seeking consensus with groups, we should lean into creative abrasion because it's in those moments of friction that spark happens. And it's a book that I go back to a lot.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time this morning.